Aloha aina, ano ai, velina kako. Welcome to Free Hawaii News, brought to you by the Koani Foundation, presenting Hawaiian perspectives on a broad range of topics and issues affecting the Hawaiian Islands, the Pacific, and the world. Your hosts for Free Hawaii News are Leon Kaulahau-Siu, musician, composer, diplomat, and political analyst, and Hina Moana-Wong, Kumu filmmaker, cultural and Hawaiian language preservationist, and community leader. And now, Free Hawaii News.
Ano ai ke aloha ia kākoa pauloa e ka lahu I aloha mai kahi au a kahi au ko pai aina nei. Ke aloha nui nui a o ko avo ke ia o Kumuhina.
And I'm Leon Kaulahau-Siu, and we're here to welcome you to this episode of Free Hawaii News. For a long time, tourism has been the main source of revenue feeding Hawaii's economy. In 2019, the last year before the COVID pandemic, 10.5 million people visited our islands. Depending on who you ask, that's been either a blessing or a curse. When the Maui fires devastated Lahaina and the surrounding areas last August, local residents became fed up with the state, with developers and others calling for a quick resumption of tourism. Many residents throughout Hawaii went on social media and asked tourists not to come to Hawaii in order to allow West Maui and Lahaina to heal, and also because residents were fed up with the overcrowding that occurs with unfettered tourism. As a result, many listened and have gone elsewhere for their vacation. Now, some in Hawaii are asking, do we need tourism at all? And if we do, what is a reasonable balance in terms of the number of tourists who visit Hawaii? There is also a growing number of Hawaii residents suggesting a different kind of tourism, one that teaches visitors about Hawaii, its culture, and how Hawaiians view the world, and Hawaii's limited natural resources. To tell us more about what's possible with a new kind of ethical tourism, we have with us Ramsey Tom, who is the director of the Pacific Island Leadership Institute at the Hawaii Pacific University. He is a respected cultural practitioner and instructor of several Native Hawaiian practices, Ho'oponopono, conflict resolution, and Lua, the Hawaiian martial arts form, among others. Kumu Ramsey is a sought-after cultural resource keynote speaker, lecturer, trainer, and facilitator. Kumu Ramsey has also been especially effective working with Hawaii's travel, leisure, and retail industry, where he has advocated for the integration of place-based, cultural-based values and principles into contemporary business practices. Aloha, Ramsey. Mahalo for being here.
Thank you, Leon. Aloha, and thank you for having me today.
Does Hawaii still need tourism? And if so, let's have your thoughts on it.
No, I appreciate that. I think there's a two-way question. One, does tourism still need Hawaii? And does Hawaii need tourism? First of all, given the amount of income that the state receives from this particular economic engine, until such time that we've actually replaced that, I think there's going to be a continued reliance on tourism. The real question, as you've asked here, is what kind of tourism and how does it meet the particular values? The other side of it is, does tourism still need Hawaii? Given the way it's being delivered, what the values might be, and more importantly, as other destinations begin to achieve the same levels of experience that perhaps people were getting from Hawaii previously. There is a love-hate relationship with tourism, I think, wherever tourism goes. So it doesn't matter whether I'm in Miami or Los Angeles. I think the residents there would say some similar things we're saying, that it's the tourists, and all the things that are happening, whether it's congested streets, litter on our beaches, etc. I think there is a tendency to place that on the visitor experience or the visitors that are coming. That said, in as much as there may be some truth to that, I think the object is, how do we engage the visitor and create an experience where Hawaii benefits, where the individuals here benefit, the land benefit, I think is really a metric. What's the metric of success that we need to look at for that industry, or any industry for that matter? How is the community left better? Is our water cleaner? Is our air cleaner? Are there more cultural activities as a result of them coming? So that when the visitor comes, can they actually say, I left this place better, rather than just taking something, whether it's my own experience or not. I had a great time, but I damaged the reef. I had a wonderful time, but I damaged the forest. I had a great time, but I left a lot of trash around. If we're not measuring those things, then I think we're going to continue to get the same results that we've seen in the past. If you want to come, or when you do come, be mindful that you're coming to a place that is not an amusement park, as amusing as it may be, that we live here, and that when you're traveling through the roads on Oahu or Maui, or you're driving through our neighborhoods, our children play there, we work there, we worship there, all of these things. So we are still there, we're still here when you leave. So unlike everything we hear about the ninth island, Las Vegas, whatever, what happens in Vegas stays in, that doesn't happen here, right? We are still here, we're a living culture, the people are here, and we want to welcome you. But please be welcoming in the process, right? Don't leave us in a worse situation than we were when you arrived. If it's about engaging, then the residents and the host of that particular destination should have some involvement or some participation that satisfies who they are and what they're about. This isn't just about satisfying the desire of the customer, because the customer isn't always right. And if we begin to lose ourselves, our identity, the health of the land, simply because the customer wants something that is inconsistent with that, then we've done ourselves, as well as the customer, eventually a disservice.
How do you, what's your vision? How do you see the tourism going? What's a new form in your mind that would be beneficial to all of us?
I think whatever occurs, at some point in time, the people of the place need to be more engaged. Really to the point of almost ownership. Right now, there are very few, and there has not been for some time, an operation that is actually owned and operated by Hawaii or Hawaiians, the local community. So I think that's one. I think there's also a model where the funding, the money does not leave the islands. Yeah, we should be putting it out there for those supporting it, but at what point in time does the lion's share begin to stay here in the islands? Where our environment is healthy, our children are healthy, our elders are healthy, and our communities are healthy. That we are not espousing success with 10.5 million people coming and money coming out, and at the same time we have those very individuals living on our beaches. When the suffrages of our communities have actually been addressed by that industry. So I think any model in the future that answers those questions, it reduces the suffrages that the communities have been experiencing over the years, despite whether it's tourism or not. Whatever model we use, if the visitor can come and be a contributor to that solution, not continuing to add to the problem.
In what way do you see our people on the ground actually contributing to improving this new tourism?
Well, Leon, I think when our communities can actually invite the visitor and determine when, where, and how they engage the visitor. What I'm sharing with you, I want to share dance, I want to share kalo, I want to share horseback riding, whatever that community chooses to share. It's not because you can afford to come, but it's something that we want to share and we want to work with you. We've actually investigated this before, where in other places you have to be invited, right? How do we invite someone come in versus because I'm here at 10, I have the time and I have the money, you therefore provide me with an authentic experience. I think it's understanding that authenticity is what we're doing at the moment, not because someone else is there, right? You come to my kalo, my lo'i, I'm here to pick taro. you're going to have a cultural experience. That's very different than let's create a cultural experience where I'm going to go outside of my lo'i, bring my kalo to you because it's comfortable for you at the hotel. See, that's not an authentic experience. It's also reframing, excuse me, and just the language. You know, an authentic commercial luau is not an authentic paina. Right. So I think a lot of this has to do with terminology. It has to do with coming back to cultural values that are place-based and not imported. And for me, the cultural values really are those values that we give priority to because they reflect our relationship to our resources and to one another. That's very different than the operating values that are brought in by a particular company or organization. Values are values, but at some point in time, we also have to look at priorities.
What's your model that you would see that would be the most ideal?
Well, I would like to see at some point in time, you know, right now we look at a vertical mass tourism experience. I think there are opportunities to go more horizontal, keep it lower, closer to the ground, and less of a mass tourism and much more smaller cultural community-oriented tourism. Now, granted, that's not going to meet all the numbers that the mass tourism operations want, but I think that's what the visitor's actually looking for based on information I've seen. They want to spend more time with locals. And oddly enough, that goes back to this whole notion of Airbnbs, VRBO, and the homestay experience. And I suspect that the visitor industry is latching on to that idea, and we will eventually see that, is that they're going to create these homestay experiences tying into the residents of the place, similar to what Uber has done with cars. But I think we can do that in advance. I think if the communities were to say, we would like to invite so many people into our community, we then become the visitor community with the intention that our kuleana now is to feed, house, and provide hospitality, but we are the managers, we are the owners. I don't have to get in my car to drive across the island to work in someone else's hotel when we as a community have actually put something together. And this actually goes back to the very early days of the visitor industry where when you came and stayed with someone and you built a relationship with them. So this may be a fast, back to the future type of thing. It was how do we bring it forward where we as the residents of the place are true hosts, welcoming people to our homes because we have a relationship with you. We share your experience and there's a mutual reciprocity rather than you pay for something and then I serve you. I think a model that really begins to embrace that kind of relationship. Again, it is a difference between relationships and transactions. I think the current industry is very transactional in its orientation, whereas the community is much more relational. When the model begins to get closer together, I think we'll begin to start seeing different results.
Oh, very good. Well, mahalo. Mahalo so much for your mana'o on this. It's been concerning, of course, for our future of Hawaii. And so mahalo for sharing that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We come now to a segment we call the Pacific Way. By Pacific Way, we mean what is the perspective or response that Pacific Islanders have to the various issues and situations and conditions that we face today. Tourism is both a blessing and a curse here in Hawaii, and recently it's becoming more of a curse because of the kind of the things that are happening, particularly by the industry people who are not very sensitive to what they're doing, and they become much more, have always been quite money-centered and commerce. So this is one of the topics that we see this direct conflict between the thinking of a commercial system and commercial enterprises, as opposed to our island lifestyle and who we are. So this is, I think, that when Ramsey talked about tourism being much more responsive to who we are, to our traditions and to our values and all that of being Hawaiians or Pacific Islanders, I think that this is a really promising way that we need to move. Now, how we get the industry to move in that direction is going to be a very big problem, because what we have found in the past is even though we've brought up these issues, And the tourism makes these remarks, and they adopt programs and things like that that seem to be echoing what we're saying and seem to be accommodating the concerns we have. But at the same time, they still are only primarily concerned about how much money they can make. And so these kinds of shifts are not necessarily to create a better experience or a better kind of industry for Hawaii, but these shifts tend to be more money oriented as well. So I think we need to be very cautious in how we approach this, knowing that, as and Ramsey pointed this out too, the motive behind the tourism industry or the visitor industry really is to make money. And so it's a matter of how do we actually help to change that kind of a view by what kind of input can we have and how do we actually promote that.
To me, the Pacific Way requires us to go back to being Pacific Island people. And it doesn't mean to completely walk away from the type of lives that we've now been accustomed to living and accultured to aspiring to. But it does mean that we, especially Kanaka, need to have access points to be able to be Kanaka, because most of us are not able to live the Pacific Island life where we can adequately be who we are, whether it's fishermen and farmers, gatherers, and any of that, without severe impact and crippling impact to our families. So it's key. Insisting on the Pacific Way means insisting that we shift the reality for who we are, what we do, why we do, and how we do in Hawaii. So that way we are rightfully welcoming a visitor into the spaces and places so that their tourist experience, their visitor experience is not extractive, but it's regenerative. Because then we can provide them the experience that is cultural. We can provide them with something that hopefully we can also turn their experience into something that is of equal benefit and a symbiotic relationship when it comes to tourism. We need to be sanctioned and to be affirmed and to be uplifted and to be endorsed by the systems that are in place rather than severely oppressed and suppressed. One
of the things that you said is that we need to be able to be who we are. And if we are in a world where we're competing for our very survival, it's very difficult to be who we are. And when we're basically all strung out trying to earn a living and trying to just survive. And many of our people, as you said, have left because they can't keep up that kind of pace. Or anyway, so it's really important, I think, for the visitor industry that our people here in Hawaii actually be happy. You know, because that will then allow us to be who we are and allow us to be more receptive and be able to share our aloha with other people when we're not so desperately trying to just survive in these islands. So the Pacific Way would be just lighten up, give us the space to be who we are so that we can actually show our aloha to other people.
Last month, a deep-sea mining vessel anchored in waters off Sand Island on Oahu as a prelude to future visits of vessels engaging in commercial exploitation of mid-Pacific deep-sea minerals worth many billions of dollars. Most Hawaii residents are unaware that highly controversial international plans exist to open vast areas of the ocean floor in the Pacific, including waters off of our Hawaiian islands, to commercial extraction of seafloor minerals. It is estimated that commercial efforts to obtain these minerals would make those whom are involved in this enterprise as wealthy as the Middle East has become because of oil. Yet, who owns or has the right to extract these minerals? And should they even be extracted at all? What environmental and ecological damage would result in doing so? To answer these questions and more, we have with us today Hanaloa Helela, Hanaloa Helela is a member of Oahu Water Protectors and is also a part of the shutdown Red Hill Mutual Aid Collective. Aloha mai ia kākou e Hanaloa.
Aloha, aloha mai.
Ai.
Mahalo.
Mahalo. Hanaloa, tell us, what is deep sea mining and how long has it been going on?
Well, deep sea mining has actually not been happening legally yet, but it's actually been going on for a while through research, actually all the way back to the 70s. In fact, UH Hawaii was one of the so-called pioneers in some of this research. Fortunately, right now, it's not legal to do any deep sea mining, but there's a big rush of companies trying to get in on what they see as the most recent gold rush of our time.
When you say deep sea mining and being legal, meaning in Hawaii?
Anywhere on the planet, actually, particularly in international waters. There hasn't been any permits given yet by the International Seabed Authority, which governs international waters and these kind of issues. But folks are lining up, and there's folks have been doing research, particularly companies like the Metals Company from Canada.
So what you're saying is that there's a whole lot of people out there in the wide world. They're very interested in this, and who knows necessarily what exactly they're doing, but they're out there, and there's a whole lot of people swarming around waiting for their opportunity to cash in.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yep. In fact, companies like the Metals Company, which is in the forefront, and which is also the company that commissioned the Hidden Gem, the ship that recently came into Hawaiian waters. They're really pushing this hard, and they want to create the impression that we need these deep sea minerals for combating climate change. So pretty much the mainstream media has been picking up that message and transmitting that, but it's not the whole story. In fact, it's a false premise. And it seems that the folks who are really pushing this thing the most are the mining companies who hope to make the billions off of our ocean treasures.
So speaking of the mining companies, Hanaloa, are you able to share with us, to your knowledge, what some of these deep sea minerals might be and what they're used for?
Probably the one most folks hear about is manganese, the manganese module. So I'm learning about this too. I remember hearing a few years back about manganese nodules and harvesting manganese nodules, and there wasn't a whole lot of information about it, and I didn't really look too deep into it. But apparently on the deep ocean floor, we're talking like 4,500, 5,000 meters down, like 2 miles down. Scattered on the floor are these like potato-sized chunks of minerals that they're basically precipitates. They take millions of years to form, and they contain minerals like manganese, cobalt, nickel, zinc, copper, and the mining companies that are hoping to cash in on this are trying to push this as necessary to promote alternative energies and electric vehicles, especially for the batteries.
Deep sea mining, is it projected that there would be extreme impact upon fish and other sea life at all levels of the ocean?
Oh yes, I mean the equipment that they want to use to harvest the minerals are basically giant vacuum cleaners that they want to set down on the seafloor to basically strip mine and suck up all of the nodules that are laying on the floor. The plumes, the sediment plumes alone that are going to be created are going to be highly impactful, not only on our fisheries, which are already in collapse, but also on our coral reefs, which are already being impacted from over-nutrification of our waters, from petrochemical pesticides and fertilizers, from golf courses and whatnot. So we're already dealing with algae blooms on our reefs. So now if we have this added stressor of massive sediment plumes that will linger for up to a year, according to a Japanese study. It's highly impactful. Now, these are just the obvious effects. What's even more concerning than that is we don't know just how this is going to affect the deep sea, the so-called benthic regions that scientists know very little about. The deep sea is the most unexplored place on our planet. Many scientists believe we know more about Mars than we do about our own deep ocean habitats. And these deep ocean habitats, this is the source of our lives, basically. According to one of our most well-known creation chants, the Kumu, the Vale Vale, which is, you know, in the first few lines of our Kumu, we talk about the Vale Vale, which is the primordial slime, which is this primordial matter. It's like that's at the very bottom of the ocean. This is where all of life evolves. And from this Vale Vale, we have our first creatures that evolved. The ukukoakoa, our coral polyp, came from this Vale Vale. So our ancestry, our very ancestry as Kanaka Maoli, as Hawaiian people, is tied to this seafloor where we believe life first evolved. So how this is going to affect very delicate ecology at the ocean floor, where there is no light, you know, it's darkness, it's silent, and it's a very still environment compared to the upper columns of the ocean. And this is where we have very unique, thousands of unique species that we know very little about, and we just don't know how that's going to be affected by this very barbaric deep sea mining that folks want to do. And just to note that they've already been doing research for some time. I believe the Hidden Gem had at least 3,000 tons of these nodules on board when they sailed past Hawaii. So we're really concerned about all the damage that's already been done at that level, just for research.
This is something that can be properly managed and controlled if somehow the world gets a hold of this. And who should properly control the waters off of Hawaii? Would you say the state of Hawaii should control it? Should it be our Hawaiian people that control it? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, this opens up a big can of worms, particularly here in Hawaii, where we are currently occupied by the United States government, illegally, I have to say. To this day, there is no legal instrument that conveyed the Hawaiian Islands to United States of America. So it's a very complicated situation when we have this rogue nation, the United States, that's in this belligerent occupation of Hawaii, and also not a signatory, not a member of the International Seabed Authority that supposedly governs these deep seas. And they're going to be making our decisions for us, which all we got to do is look at history and see what they've done to our lands and water already.
You just mentioned that the United States is not a signatory. Tell us, what is the United States not a signatory to?
They're not a signatory to the authority that's governing the deep sea, that's going to make the regulations, that's going to actually grant the permits for deep sea mining. So we're really not sure where they're going to land on this, but we can, you know, if history is any lesson, they're definitely going to go for it as well, because there are billions to be made.
So the situation for us here in Hawaii is that Hawaiians are not in political control of our lands and our natural resources. The United States controls it, but the United States is not on the radar when it comes to ratifying any type of effort that says it's okay, not okay, and whatever is a part of the details with deep sea mining. So in other words, the United States could go veritably unchecked.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, that's kind of their modus operandi for many things, where they don't sign on to climate accords that are meant to fight climate change. And in fact, on that note, I mean, I mentioned that earlier, that the metals company and all of the deep sea mining companies lining up are using climate change as an excuse to push deep sea mining, saying it's required, we need this to be able to produce our electric vehicle batteries, our cell phone batteries, solar panels, windmills. But this isn't true, because there's a lot of technology coming out, new generation batteries that don't require these deep sea metals. So it's, in fact, there's a growing percentage in China and around the world of these new technology, I believe they're called lithium iron phosphate batteries. And they don't need deep sea metals, and some use very small quantities of metals that are found in the deep sea. But all of these metals are also available on land.
A recent New York Times investigation found that commercial deep sea mining company gained access to the data of the most valuable zones to mine, information that was instead supposed to be shared with small island states. That company now stands to earn some $31 billion from mining those areas over a 25-year period. Do you believe that this could happen here in Hawaii as well?
Oh yes, oh yes. Again, history tells us that this is the playbook of the United States and big business in general. Big business and the military work hand in hand. Just like the overthrow of Hawaii 130 years ago, big business was actually the excuse the Americans used to protect American lives and property. We know for a fact no American lives were in danger 130 years ago, but they were worried about their businesses. And again, they want to push this because it's a huge boon. There's billions to be made, and they want to get in on it, because the main area, the most plentiful area for these manganese modules, these polymetal modules, because there's these other minerals involved too, happens to be right near Hawaii, in between Mexico and Hawaii, the Clarion-Clipperton Zone. It's about 4.5 million square kilometers, a huge area. It's only hundreds of miles away from our southeast, from the Big Island. So anything that happens in this zone, which is the metals company and other deep sea mining companies are really promoting the fact that there's more cobalt, manganese, zinc, and nickel found in these deep sea nodules than there are in all the landmines put together. And so they're trying to use that as an excuse that to combat land mining, that we should really harvest from the sea, which doesn't take any digging. But that is very misleading, because they may not be digging, but they're using these giant vacuum cleaners to basically vacuum everything up off the seafloor.
Most people today are not aware that deep sea mining is being planned in Hawaiian waters. Why do you think this is so?
I think it's very typical of business to try to work in the shadows. I think they know that, particularly here in Hawaii, a lot of folks are very environmentally conscious, that we've had so much going on here with Red Hill and Po'akuloa and TMT up at Mauna Kea. We're constantly dealing with big corporations that are adversely impacting our environment. So they know better. They want to stay under the radar. In fact, this recent sail by the Hidden Gem, which is the biggest deep sea mining ship in the world, they were supposed to tie off at Sand Island, but apparently they got word of our activity there. We were waiting for them. We had a group of folks who were not going to let them pass without letting them know they are not welcome here in Hawaii. And they got the message, because they just decided to sail on by and went straight to Korea instead. So they don't want people to know, because they know we're going to stand up and call them on this.
At least 20 countries have called for either a ban or a moratorium on seabed mining. Do you agree with this? And what are your thoughts for everyone else on how we feel about this?
Oh, definitely, definitely. In fact, Canada, which is the home country of the metals company, also has asked for a pause. They didn't ask for a moratorium, but at least a pause. So that is, gives me some hope that folks know that they're being rushed into this. And again, I got to point back to new generation battery technology that is proof that we don't need to rely on these deep sea metals to be able to meet climate change targets if we want to help combat the rising temperature on our planet.
Mahalo Hanaloa for being vigilant and for being a part of the effort to raise Hawaii's voice and to ensure that our presence in the discussion is not overlooked. There was a recent protest at Sand Island here on Oahu regarding deep sea mining. Are you able to share with us just for a moment about that?
Yeah, it was pretty last minute that we found out. Again, a lot of us this is all new to us. We're learning about this on the fly, and as soon as we learned that the ship was coming into our waters and carrying a huge load of nodules, of polymetal nodules on there, and we didn't know why they're coming here, what they plan on doing with those nodules, we wanted to get down there and make our presence known, and which we did. And we had an OHA trustee there. We had Nainoa Thompson from the Polynesian Voyaging Society and others speaking, who were trying to raise awareness of this, and we were prepared to meet them where they were going to anchor. We were at Sand Island, and they decided to pass on by. So they did get the message that they are not welcomed here in Hawaii. They didn't want any negative press. And this plays to that question earlier of why people don't know, because they're trying to keep it on the down low. They know that this isn't pono. They know that there's not enough research yet. There's not enough regulations, and there's possibly no way these deep sea minerals can be mined without profound impact to our environment.
Mahalo Hanaloa. I recall that day as well, as we were able to spend time at Sand Island that day. And I too raised my voice in acknowledgement that this is not something that we should be engaging in, because, as you mentioned earlier, the lessons that come from the Kumulipo tell us about duality. For all life that is found within the ocean, there is its parallel and its equivalent on the land. And when there is a symbiotic and positive relationship, and when there is balance, then both land and sea are healthy. When something on the land is not healthy, it's also indicative that something in the sea will not be healthy, and vice versa. So it's important for us to remember, and for all of us to continue to be vigilant and aware. So mahalo to you, Hanaloa, for being one of the faces that is making a clear stand, and for joining us here in studio today to speak to us about deep sea mining. It's imperative that our community pay attention, and that we not just simply sit back and watch things happen. We need to be aware of what happens in our home. We need to be aware of what's being done that could have a ripple effect that we would never ever recover from. So mahalo Hanaloa, mahalo anui ya oe no ko kipa ana mai a mako I ne'i ma Free Hawaii News. He mauma na o e ai no paha kau. Do you have any other thoughts?
Oh, mahalo to you, Hina, for all you do, and for being there that day. You were a very powerful voice, and I was very grateful for your advocacy for the Aina and for our kai, for our moana, as usual, making that stand with us and showing that our lahui, we are waking up.
Aye.
And we are learning what's going on, and we are not going to take it. We are going to stand for our oceans and our lands
Ai.
and our culture. So mahalo. Thank you for having me.
Mahalo. Mahalo nui a oi Hanaloa. No laila e kia naina, mahalo nui. We are very grateful for Hanaloa being here with us today. And it's important, once again, for all of us to be absolutely vigilant about what happens to the ocean that surrounds us, the land that we live off of, because these are the things that sustain us. And the land is not the only one that provides for us, but the sea as well. And from our oceans come all life.
Last month, on January 17, as we have done for the past 31 years, Hawaiian nationals marched from Mauna Ala, the royal mausoleum, and rallied at Iolani Palace, continuing our protests of the day in 1893 that a small group of insurgents backed by U.S. military forces illegally seized control of the Hawaiian Kingdom government and sought to annex Hawaii to the United States. Then it was 126 years ago that the United States, using the excuse of military necessity, illegally annexed the Hawaiian Islands. We know it was patently illegal because there was no treaty of annexation where Hawaiians agreed to the annexation, and in fact, the Ku'e petition showed the people of Hawaii overwhelmingly opposed annexation to the U.S. Scholarship, legal analysis, historical documents, and apologies for the wrongdoing indicate that these two actions clearly violated the sovereignty of the Hawaiian Kingdom and violated international laws. Yet, in recent years, when attempts were made to challenge these illegal acts in the courts of law, the cases were summarily dismissed. Why is that? It has to do with the difference between the legal question and the political question. The law enforcement and courts deal with the legal question. What do the laws say about a particular matter? Is the matter in question in violation or in keeping with a law that is in force? The political question has to do with how such a law came to be. In a democracy, laws are made and adopted by a political process. The laws are made by a legislature that was elected by the people. The voters give their consent to the people they elect to make the laws. The laws are made or changed by a political process. The police, the judges, the courts are there to administer and enforce the laws. A court can only rule upon the legal question on laws that are there at the time. In 2010, at a review of the United States at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, Poka Lainui, our friend, who was part of our delegation to the session, to that particular human rights session, asked the United States representative, by what legal means did the United States acquire the sovereign nation of Hawaii? After being obviously flustered for 30 seconds or so, the U.S. representative blurted out, "This is not a legal question, it's a political question, and the political question has been settled." What did he mean by that? We pondered that for a while. What does the political question has been settled mean? After World War II, when the United Nations was formed with great hopes to reform the world, at that time 75% of the nations of the world were under colonial rule. They were being ruled by an outside power. The UN set out to change that, to set those nations free, and adopt decolonization as one of its major objectives. In 1946, about 100 colonies and possessions were placed on a United Nations list of territories, nations, to be decolonized. Hawaii was placed on that list, 1946. Now, arguments could be made that the Hawaiian Islands did not belong on the list because Hawaii was still a sovereign nation. But at that time, the prevailing perception was that the Hawaiian Islands was part of the United States as a U.S. territory because of the 1898 so-called annexation. Now, getting back to the UN's decolonization process, its purpose was to allow the people of those territories or nations to be decolonized, to have a political process to determine for themselves what their future political status would be. In a democratic society to which the UN adheres, the political question involves conducting a vote by which the people give their free, prior, and informed consent. Thus, referenda were held by these nations to be decolonized, and slowly, as the people voted, colonial nations began to emerge as independent countries. The United Nations process for decolonization proceeded. Some went relatively smoothly, others had struggles and some went through some really bloody conflicts, places such as North Africa and Indochina. The United Nations started in 1946 with 51 member countries. Today, the UN has 193 member countries. Roughly 80% of them went through the UN's decolonization process of the people voting to be independent of their colonial rulers. There are only 17 territories remaining on the list to be decolonized, but we do know there are many, many other nations and places that should be decolonized. Now, as I mentioned, the Hawaiian Islands was on the list of territories to be decolonized. So what happened? Why did other nations have votes for decolonization but not Hawaii? Well, actually, Hawaii did have a referendum for decolonization, only the Hawaiian people did not know it. We were never told that's what it was. The vote was held in 1959 and was called the Statehood plebiscite, by which a large majority of the voters in Hawaii voted for statehood, full integration into the United States. Although the referendum was flawed in many respects, the United States reported to the United Nations General Assembly that the vote had occurred and people of Hawaii had chosen to become integrated into the United States. Without suspecting the outright fraud involved in the vote, the United Nations accepted the United States report and removed Hawaii from the list of nations to be decolonized, indicating the issue of the future governance of the Hawaiian Islands had been settled. Hawaii had apparently chosen to become part of the United States. Therefore, the political question was settled. The issue of independence for Hawaii was no longer on the table. A political question can be unsettled and reconsidered, especially one that is based on a critical error. The UN erroneously acted because it accepted the false US report. This provides us the key by which the United Nations General Assembly could fairly easily be compelled to withdraw its endorsement of the United States' claim that Hawaii is a state of the United States. By doing so, the United States' claim that Hawaii is a state of the United States would be nullified, and the Hawaiian Kingdom, a nation in continuity by default, is restored as the legitimate government for the Hawaiian Islands. In my next UN report, I will discuss the specifics for how we can trigger actions at the United Nations that will bring about the restoration of the Hawaiian Kingdom as a sovereign independent nation.
Aloha Aina, as we know it, the literal translation is love of land. But we as Kanaka know that it is not just the physical land, but it is the water sources that are found on the land and the water sources that surround the land. So this year makes 10 years since our community on Oahu was alerted to the travesty that occurred at kapu kaki there in what is now known as Red Hill to the community. And we saw Kia'i rise once again, as Kia'i did to protect Mauna Kea from further desecration. And we saw not only the grassroots level Kia'i and Po'ealoha Aina rise up, but we saw people at the state level and the city and county level. We saw every level of existing government come and stand with the community in a united effort and a united front to say that our water source must be protected. However, it is absolutely essential to remember that it's not just the water sources here on the land, but it is the entire ocean that surrounds us. Not only is the Moana Nui, or from the Kai Papa'u, to Kai Hohonu, to the Moana Nui, Moana Lipo Lipo. From the shallowest reaches of the sea to the deepest parts. Our ocean is equally as important as the land and the freshwater sources. For example, when we honor the underground water source, we invoke the ancestral deity name of Kanaloa. And that Kanaloa name, that underground water source, is affiliated again with Kanaloa, but likewise, the ocean itself is also the direct connect to the name Kanaloa. And when we consider what that means for us as Kanaka, it means that there is a very intricate balance, and that equilibrium between what occurs in the sea and the marine life and everything that comes with the ocean. We know that the health of us on the land is also highly contingent upon the health of our ocean. And therefore, when we consider what is before us now, deep sea mining is something that we must be absolutely conscious of. It is told to us in our Kumulipo, in one of the most honored and respected of genealogy chants, that is the equivalent to what science knows as the great cosmogony of our people. And what science knows as evolution, we know is not only Hawaiian science, but it is also traditional Hawaiian religion. It is also the understanding of our relationship to land and sea, and about balance and duality. Whatever there is, all of the marine life that is within the ocean has its counterpart to something on the land. And you can tell by what's happening on the land when something is going abloom. Palakahala, momona kavana. We have chants that speak to us about when things come to fruit on the land and they come to maturity, they also are in fruition and great fertility in the ocean. So these lessons that are centuries old, and they come to us from our kupuna, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We simply have to know how that wheel works, and we have to know its intimate mechanics so that we understand. We, mankind, have every capacity and every ability to make a difference. So when it comes to the topic of deep sea mining, we certainly do not know enough, and we certainly cannot overlook the fact that our Kanaka in Hawaii were absolutely careful about what was done to the sea. It was against our practice to overfish, to overtake. We only took what we needed, and we only went in the places that we were allowed to go. Much like how we're only allowed to access the higher elevations, the realm of Wakea, we are only allowed to access the deeper depths of Kanaloa to a certain point, and then we must remember the place of Kanaka in this life that we live. So everyone, it is an extremely delicate balance, and with so much that we don't know, how can we possibly trust that something that we already know culturally would not be an appropriate thing to do? How could we trust this then to occur in Hawaii? And therefore we must be not only absolutely vigilant, but we must be absolutely proactive in saying no to deep sea mining. We cannot only focus on the economics of it, because at the end of the day, there is no amount of economics that can ever compensate for the taxing and the cost that will conflict with our lives and our livelihoods. So, pēlā no ke ano ka noho ana, o ka mana o nui noho i keia, i nā mālama noho i kākou, i nā aloha ho i kākou, i ko kākou aina, pono e aloha ki ka vai ko ka honua, a me ke kai. Ke kai nui, ka moana nui, ka moana lipo lipo. Pēlā no ko kākou ano ka noho ana, kanaka Hawaii, ka lāhui aloha. No laila, ke lauele no ka manao o Kumuhina.
Mahalo nui loa for joining us today for this episode of Free Hawaii News. And we also say mahalo to our guests who are on with us today.
Ai mahalo anu ia oko, no ko oko ho'onene ana mai, eia no wahiki mai ho i kākou, i ka hopena o keia polokalamu nei. Ke aloha nui no ka aina ia oko, ahui ho, aloha.
We hope you enjoyed this month's episode of Free Hawaii News. Mahalo for watching. There's a new show every month, so this program will air several more times this month. You can view it anytime on Olelo's on-demand site or on YouTube. See you next time. Ahui ho, aloha aina.
Free Hawaii Broadcasting Network.